Well, good morning, everyone. It's 10 o'clock. Time for me to start this hearing concerning the Old Oakham Park Royal Development Corporation local plan modifications. Thank you all for being there. Before we start, I just need to check that everybody attending can see and hear me. So can you all please use your hand raise tool to show me that you can hear me and see me? Yes. Yep, that's everybody, except for Anna Alger.
And myself, Robin Brown.
Uh,
I can't see you.
you can't see me, Robin.
No,
Okay.
but I can hear you. I can see a big P and a big C.
Okay.
But
That's what I'll do. What I'll do, Robin, is I shall turn off my video and turn it back on again and see if that makes any difference. Has that made any difference to you, Robin? No, Robin, your microphone is off, Robin.
no, unfortunately, I can't see you. But it might be broadband difficulties at my end.
Yes, I think it probably is. I say I've turned my video off and on, and everybody else has got their hand up. So I think it is a problem your end, Robin. Okay. Thank you, everyone else. You can put your hands down now. Good. Second thing I need to do before we get underway is just remind you that in accordance with the data protection regulations, I need to tell you that this session is being recorded. It's also being live streamed, so other people may record it as well. And if you're not happy with your image or voice being recorded, then you need to switch off your camera and your microphone. You'll still be able to watch the proceedings, but you obviously won't be able to take part if you do that. So there we go. I think everybody attending this morning has attended one of these sessions before, so you know about the protocols about using your microphone and not using the chat function and so on. So I also don't need to go through the rest of my introductory material because you've heard it all before. This morning we're dealing with policies E1 and E2. Now in my agenda paper, I've set out what the modifications are, and I've made the comment that there's not actually much to them. They reflect the changes in job creation, which would result from the changes to the SIL designation and the site allocations, which my interim findings required. And then policy clause B of policy E1 is also extended to protect not just existing floor space, but also the capacity for floor space. Nevertheless, Grand Union Alliance seeks specific changes to the two modified policies by adding two sections to clause B of policy E1. Firstly, inserting the words no net loss of jobs after the word capacity, and also by adding we provide suitable premises for all existing businesses from across the OPDC area as a priority in any redevelopment in Park Royal and Old Oak North. And secondly, adding to policy E2C the following: support any existing businesses that cannot be incorporated in line with Part B to relocate off-site. Now, because the Grand Union Alliance has suggested specific changes to the plan, that gives them rights to be heard, and so this hearing session is called in order to give them that right. The Grand Union Alliance gives 4 reasons for seeking these further modifications. And in summary, they are that arising from hearing session 16 on day 8 of the earlier hearing sessions, the OPDC were requested to review the matters raised in that hearing session and consider whether more can be done. Grand Union Alliance obviously was not content with what the OPDC have done and feel that more should be done. The second point that the Grand Union Alliance makes is that as policies E1 and E2 have evolved through successive iterations of the plan, the protections of policy E2, B and C have become restricted to businesses outside the strategic industrial location, and the further modifications are sought to remedy that. Then the third point they make is that the policies as drafted contain drafting errors. E1D cross refers to T8 instead of T7, and the requirement for a design and access statement has been deleted from policy E1E, but not from E2A2. And then the fourth point they make is that recent development trends retain and intensify floor space, but their job creation is often much lower than many existing businesses, and so they want to focus on jobs rather than floor space, pointing out that it is a jobs target rather than a floor space target that is part of the London Plan's strategic quanta of development. The corporation has responded by proposing no further change, and they explain that the word capacity has been added as a modification to clarify that the policy applies in circumstances where there was reduced or no existing industrial floor space on site. And they say that policies SP5 and E1 are clear that development within strategic industrial land should help contribute towards meeting the local plan strategic jobs target, 36,350 new jobs, and the plan identifies sites that will contribute towards delivering this target. Policy E1, they say, seeks to ensure a range of suitable workspaces are delivered so that industrial uses and different business sizes can be accommodated, and the range of workspaces will help provide opportunities for industrial businesses to stay, grow and locate in the OPDC area. But in effect, what they're saying is that the policies do set a jobs target and so are focused on jobs, not just on floor space. And they finally say that paragraph 9.18 sets out a sequential approach if applicants are supporting businesses to relocate off-site. And the first step in the sequential process focuses within the OPDC area. So they're arguing that plan already does what Grand Union Alliance is seeking. So really, it seems to me there are two. I'll come to you in a minute, Robin. It seems to me there are two matters for discussion: whether the introduction of the word capacity is an adequate response to the earlier hearing findings, and whether the further modifications which the GUA seek are necessary to the soundness of the plan in the light of the OPDC's responses. So there we go. Let's kick off. Robin, I was going to ask you to speak first anyway, because I've just summarised the OPDC's response to your request for further modifications. So I guess it's right that we hear from you first.
Well, actually, I just want to make an intervention on clarifying your agenda paper.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm right. The actual change that the GUA sought in our representations to policy E2C, you had actually quoted what's in the printed policy from the OPDC. What the GUA wanted to add was to, with priority to reproviding within the Park Royal and Old Oak North area. So
I've misquoted you, have I, dear?
well, it just missed that phrase off the end of your penultimate paragraph on page 2.
Okay.
But I don't think I'm disadvantaged in any way, because it's clearly set out in the original representations.
Yes.
Yeah.
Somehow I've missed them, Robin. So can you read it out again with priority?
It's a repetition of the word change to E1, that is with priority to reproviding within the Park Royal and Old Oak North. I'm not actually obsessed with the particular wording, but the sense is that it's to prioritize relocation, reprovision locally within OPDC.
Okay, thanks for that, Robin. It's I want to track back how I've managed to miss that out. I was taking the your representations from the OPDC summary spreadsheet. So it may be that there was an original error in that, or it may be that I've misread it. But I will track back and make sure that I have got the full thing. So thank you for that. All right. Having made that correction, what would you like to say about the? Before I ask you to do that, I see Mr. Mools wants to say a word. So let's hear from Richard Mools first.
Thank you, sir. Just to assist, the part that Mr. Brown was reading from, I think you'll find on the 6th page, 3rd paragraph of the GUA's 5th of July representations. So if that assists you getting the correct quotation.
Thank you. That will help me track it down. Thank you. Okay, and I see I've got Lauren Laviniere also wants to speak. Lauren.
Just also to add that you do quote the reference accurately on page 2 of your agenda, and towards the bottom. So the correct phrasing is in your agenda pack. Second page.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, thanks, Lauren. Right. So having set the scene, and we've heard the my summary of the OPDC's response to the representation. I think I'd like to hear from Robin, or what your reaction to corporate response is.
Right. Thank you very much, sir. Well, the GUA is seeking 3 phrase changes to the 2 policies, and I will address the 2 of them first. That with regard to if I paraphrase it as reproviding as a priority locally, and leave the known net loss of jobs to later on in the discussion, because I'm equivocating over that particular request for a word change, as it may have unintended consequences, adverse consequences, for the protection and strengthening of jobs in Park Royal. But I'd like to have a discussion on that later. So if I just set out why we are requesting further changes, it's because the policies E1 and E2 have evolved over time. And originally E1 focused on protecting employment across the whole OPDC area, and E2 originally focused on supporting new employment space across the whole OPDC area. Now, The current iterations have E1 just focusing on protecting industrial floor space capacity in SIL, and E2 just supporting new employment uses outside of SIL. So there's a geographical division there. On the face of it, it's entirely logical, given the interim findings and other such things. But in doing so, the merited protections for existing businesses that flow from policy E2, particularly B and C, no longer apply as explicit and definite policy to E1, which deals with SIL. And the proposed changes are an attempt to remedy this, together with a strengthening of policy E2, for both policies strengthening through re-providing locally, that is within the OPDC area. So that's my introduction to clarify why we're asking. And then the first question is capacity an adequate response to the earlier hearing? And the addition of the word capacity and its explanation from the OPDC is understood and welcomed. The OPDC explains that in order that the policy applies where existing industrial floor space is reduced or has been lost, as in the clearing of sites before planning application. But I would add, this only applies to E1's industrial capacity within SIL. What about E2? For E2B expects re-provision of existing industrial floor space where existing use is compatible with land use policy. Would not the same scenario where existing industrial floor space is reduced or has been lost, as in the clearing the sites before a planning application is made, also apply here? So I'm suggesting that if it's good enough for E1, necessary for E1, it ought to be applied to E2 as well. So that's my response to the precise addition of capacity. And then I want to move on to exploring what followed on from the actual hearing session on industrial intensification. In a sense, Inspector, you said homework for the OPDC through ID 26, and they responded.
Yep.
With, I'm looking for the OPDC 31, the response. I wanted to run through the various points raised there. Should I stop there or?
No, carry on.
Carry on. Okay, thank you. So you would be familiar with ID 21, the matters arising from hearing sessions, and there's a list of points there. And my intention is to focus on the relocation strategy. As I said, really our changes are seeking to give priority to relocation of existing businesses within the OPDC area. Right. Now, OPDC 31, the response document. The GUA recognizes the heed placed by OPDC on various points in that document: the compatibility of neighboring uses, specific needs of varying range of businesses, intensification opportunities, and recognizing linkages. I don't wish necessarily to discuss each and every point in turn, but I would add on recognizing linkages, here it's only about transport connectivity. And I previously expressed reservations on delivery through the pausing of the Park Royal livable neighbourhoods bid yesterday. But linkages within Park Royal aren't only about transport. Very important, importantly, are the business-to-business linkages. And I'll come on to the sort of economic ecosystem of Park Royal later. And I've gained an understanding of how important these business-to-business connections are, that they're in a relatively concentrated local area, from attending various conferences held by Park Royal Business Group and others, and attending seminars and so forth. Now, moving on, the next point is identification of minimum degree for intensification. That is a minimum plot ratio. And I agree that a minimum plot ratio would overcomplicate the employment policies. And I noticed that the new London plan is relegating any discussion of minimum plot ratio to a supplementary planning guidance document. Moving on, we're getting to the heart of the matter here. Just before the relocation strategy, we've got measures to encourage existing business to thrive and grow. Now, this is what the plan policies and the OPDC as a development corporation ought to be focusing on, encouraging existing businesses to thrive and grow. There are additional things like encouraging new growth sectors. But anyway, I'll deal with this point. And the GUA appreciates the work done by the OPDC on promoting such things as environmental sustainability, digital connectivity, and the skills hub in Park Royal. But there was a specific proposal in the OPDC's response to add a new clause E to policy E2, delivering interim employment development where this would not impact on deliverability and the phasing of site allocations set out in table 3.1, together with some text. This has not been followed through. The document OPDC 34 was, of course, produced before the interim findings, and the OPDC may have thought that subsequently that they're now irrelevant. That is the clause E. I would point out there are employment sites outside of SIL subject to site allocations for phasing years 6 to 20. And that's evident from the site allocations table and the development capacity study update. I've identified 4, and I stand to be corrected or added to. Number 13, which is Victoria Industrial Estate in North Acton. Number 27, Harrow Road, that's at the northern end of Scrubs Lane. Number 34, Mitre Industrial Estate. And number 39, Scrubs Lane Car Giant. As I say, these are phased for years 6 to 20. So there is an interim period there prior to expected development, which could be as long as 20 years, maybe, or less. And I do appreciate the OPDC's looking for early delivery, given the housing need that was talked about yesterday. But nevertheless, there is an interim period here, and if the OPDC had advanced a new clause E for sorry, yes, new clause E for policy E2 some time ago. Surely the same circumstances and justifications still apply. And I think the enterprises located here would benefit from the positivity of new clause E. It's a very supportive clause without prejudicing eventual redevelopment as per the plan. So that's one point I wish to make and emphasize. Right.
Okay, just pause a moment.
Yes, thank you.
Because I'm just realised I can't find ID 31 on the examination website.
Correction. ID 26 is your examination document.
Yeah.
And it's OPDC 34. 31, beg your pardon, OPDC 31.
Yes. I can't spot it on the examination website for some reason.
It's if you go to session 16, matter 12, day 8.
Oh, right.
It's in that box there.
Session 16.
Industrial intensification.
Matter 12, yes. I've got my agenda for that. That's on the website, but I can't find the document that you're referring to. Never mind. I'll track it down later, but just for the moment, as you're referring to it, I can't call it up on my screen. So when you do refer to it, Robin, can you go slowly so that I can note
Yes.
reference as you have it. Yeah, I'll find it later.
I don't know if well, Lauren, perhaps she can help navigate. It's on the examination documents page, web page.
Yeah, I'm happy to navigate you to that document, Inspector. If you keep scrolling down, there's a heading that comes up that's hearing statements and related documents, and there's a table under that.
Yeah, hang on, wait a minute. Yes. Oh, it's in there, is it? Right.
Yeah, it's in that table under the hearing statements and related documents for matter 12.
Matter 12. Okay, yes.
OPDC 31.
Oh, yeah, there it is. Got it. Thank you very much, Lauren. Okay, thank you, Lauren. I've got it now, Robin, so
Yes.
I can see what you're referring to. Good. Sorry about
so
that.
You can see from that document, I've been running through the subheadings, the various points.
Yeah, I can see that now. Okay, right, you carry on now. I've got it.
So that was my first substantial point, was about what's happened to new clause E.
Yeah.
Under measures to encourage existing businesses to thrive and grow.
Yeah.
Moving on, as I said earlier, I really want to focus on the relocation strategy part of the OPD's response, which was in turn responding to the request made at the earlier hearing that the OPDC should be more proactive.
Yeah.
And discussion of this is very relevant to 2 of the 3 changes requested by the GUA.
Mm-hmm.
The OPDC's response was that E2, B and C are effective at enabling the corporation to support business relocations. And they added in the modifications paragraph 9.19, where appropriate, using compulsory purchase powers to facilitate relocations case by case. As I've explained in the outset of my presentation and in the request to be heard, E2 and its helpful protections for existing businesses only applies to employment sites outside of SIL. And I would express an appreciation for the wording within policy E2 and its text, as elaborated widely throughout the text, particularly paragraph 916, ensuring legacy and cohesion continues, and paragraph 918 on business relocation strategy. And these helpful protections I'm seeking to have realized. Well, actually, I would explain the helpful protections lead to the outcomes sought in the that are sought in the text, particularly the continuance of the local economy and the creative and cultural activities. Where the GUA is very appreciative and supportive of that. But what we want, with the priority to re-providing locally, is to strengthen the policy E2 to take references from the text and incorporate them into the policy box. Right, so I wanted then to go on to justify that, or to explain what is happening in Park Royal at the moment and why it's important, or rather in the Park Royal and North Old Oak area. There's the vulnerability of businesses in any redevelopment schemes. The GUA previously quoted the example of the perfume factory at North Acton, where some 80 small businesses, including significant numbers of artists, were displaced. And whilst there was no systematic tracking of them undertaken, it's believed that many are no longer operating in the vicinity. Now that is information of 2018 vintage. Moving on, at the 2019 hearing, we heard from Andrew Drakers of the West London Business, explaining that a survey had found only about half of businesses that had relocated or been decanted from high-speed 2 construction sites relocated locally, due in part to the increased competitiveness for premises. Well, moving on again, quoted in the Industrial Land Review addendum of 2021, since the adoption of the new London Plan, which identifies an ongoing net demand for industrial capacity until at least 2041, and highlights specific demand within the Park Royal Heathrow property market area. What I'm saying there is, and it's recognised by the OPDC, that there is great demand for industrial capacity. More recently, an interim report has been published by an independent organisation, Centre for London, namely the Industrial Land Commission initial conclusions of September 2021. This is an independent expert-led commission to provide fresh thinking on the future of London's industrial land. It's chaired by Liz Peace, chairman of OPDC.
Can you give me the title?
Yeah.
Can you give me the title of that report again?
Yes. The document is in the examination library. Industrial Land Commission, initial conclusions, September 2021.
Oh, yeah. Is that the document that you asked to be added to
Yes.
the examination library a few days ago? Yeah, I
Yeah.
haven't read it yet, but I know that it's there.
But I'll give you the gist of it. And it's chaired by Liz Peace, chair of OPDC, chair of the trustees of Centre for London, among other things. So it was set up given the past reduction and more recent growth in demand for industrial land to serve a broad range of industrial activities. And I'm in agreement with the OPDC and the London plan that we're talking about a broad range of industrial activities. So admittedly, that document gives a London-wide perspective, but there is a local reference. On page 4, it said that in 2020, land values in Park Royal were as high as £7 million per acre, up from an average of 2.5 million in 2017. Following up on that, more recently, I have read an article in Capital West London on a recent transaction in Waxlow Road that £48 million was paid for a 2.9 acre site, whereas the initial guide price was actually half that at 23 million. And that represents £16 million an acre for an industrial site close to the Harlesden station end of Park Royal. I just wanted to put in an illustration of using that to illustrate the rocketing values of industrial land, given the demand for it. As I said, the Industrial Land Commission report, an interim report, has a London-wide perspective, and it talks about rising prices, land values, increasingly constrained land supply, making it difficult for smaller and emerging businesses to compete with sectors willing to pay more, the lack of affordable space leading to displacement and to less optimal locations. So given the circumstances, there's an increasing imperative to enable existing businesses to thrive and grow, the point made at the earlier hearing, and for the OPDC to be more proactive in terms of a corporate strategy for business relocations. So the GUA is asking here to make changes to both policies E1 and E2 along the lines of re-providing suitable premises for existing businesses locally as a priority. I think I've come to sort of a natural break in my presentation, and I do note that I haven't addressed no net loss of jobs directly, and I think that needs further discussion, which I believe you're open to, given that policy can be quite fuzzy when faced with the realities of situations, and may have unintended adverse consequences.
Yes, would you like to elaborate on that, Robin? And because I got the impression from what you said earlier that although that was your representation, you were not sure that you wanted to insist upon it in the light of further thoughts. So right. share those further thoughts with us.
Right. Yes. Right. I'll start off with what I originally composed, and that was about no net lost jobs added to E1B. And the starting point for the OPDC in planning its area has always been the development targets handed down from the London Plan and through the Opportunity Area Planning Framework. And the current new London Plan expresses these as opportunity area indicative capacity for new homes and jobs. These have been refactored for the draft local plan to align with a 20-year period to 38. And the new jobs strategic target is certainly quoted in E1 and E2 and SP5 and disaggregated in the place policies. So that's really a reiteration of fact. I would point out, I do have a number of typos to talk about, but E2A Roman numeral 1, the new is missing from the strategic target. New jobs is quoted in policy E1, and not the new for jobs in E2. But anyway, that's an aside. We can come to the typos later. So the recent supporting studies, such as the Industrial Land Review Addendum and the Old Oak North Intensification Study of 2021, primarily focused on identifying and justifying intensification of industrial land as expressed in terms of uplifts to floor space, but not to jobs, and it's jobs that are the set target. It's not quite clear to me how these have been translated from the jobs target, how translated into floor space. The 2018 Park Royal Intensification Study did discuss jobs as well as floor space. And the original Industrial Land Review described the great differences in likely job densities for different functions. For example, for a business center, it could be expected that there would be 1 worker to every 50 square meters of floor space. At the other end of the range, standalone warehouses would have 1 worker to 91 square meters, double the space in effect, a lower density of employment. So much depends on the type of jobs or the type of industrial activity being promoted if you are to reach the set strategic target. And as I set out in the request to be heard, the right to be heard, the GUA have concerns about recent development trends, previously big box warehousing and currently data centers. And these have job creations in terms of job density per floor area, often much lower than many existing businesses. I do have an example of a data center on a site that was identified in the Park Royal Intensification Study as a case study for intensification, 37 to 39 North Acton Road. And it appears on page 66 onwards of the appendix to the intensification study. And by applying the job density figures that come from the Industrial Land Review, the original version of the Industrial Land Review, seems to me that the intensified development that was illustrated in that document and its intensification that the OPDC and the London Plan are seeking for Park Royal would have generated something of the order of 150 jobs, whereas the planning application for the data center expects to have 90 jobs for a 24-hour, 7 days a week operation. It's not only the scale of jobs. In a sense, that's a hypothetical example because the intensification won't happen and possibly the data center might not be delivered. But we lost a traditional, if old-fashioned, warehouse industrial building, or potentially will, to make way for a new enterprise, which doesn't necessarily provide the rich and varied jobs that the local residents are seeking. So the point I want to really make is about re-provisioning and protecting existing jobs while creating new ones. And what is happening is that the offer of Park Royal is changing. It has changed over the years, and the incorporation of new growth sectors in principle is a natural and welcomed part of its evolution. But at risk are the diverse and varied premises and the businesses that are able to occupy them, which are an essential ingredient to its success and its contribution to the working economy of London. So that's what I had to say so far. And
Okay, Robin, yes. You say so far. There is more you want to say later?
Well, I'm interested to participate in any discussion. As I said, here today, I'm actively promoting greater support for the relocation of existing businesses within the local area as a priority, to strengthen policies E1 and E2. But I have my doubts as to the appropriateness of no net loss of jobs. It's okay site by site, but as a general statement, it doesn't necessarily offer the protection and strengthening that I'm seeking for local businesses. That they could be outbid by alternative uses. Industrial market.
Yeah. Okay.
So on the policy, the changes to the policy, I do recognise that E1C supports existing small businesses to be re-provided, but there are a lot of other enterprises that aren't necessarily small, but still make a valuable contribution to Park Royal and London.
Okay.
And that E2, I want the merits of the text incorporated into the policy box through what I'm suggesting is re-providing a priority to re-providing locally.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for that exposition, Robin. I think this is not something of which I'm going to reach a conclusion today, because there's quite a lot of dense argument which needs me to refer to some of the documents you've referred to, and you've made points today which I hadn't grasped in my earlier reading of the material. So that of itself justified holding the hearing, because that proves its worth. But I think what I need to do now is to hear from the OPDC what commentary they have on what you've said and whether they think there is anything further that they should be doing now. So let's hear from them. Richard Moores, who are you going to nominate to give that response?
Thank you. So it's going to be Lauren taking the lead on this. If I could ask her to introduce herself and respond, please.
Okay. So Lauren, the floor is yours.
Hiya, my name is Lauren Lavinia. I'm a Senior Planning Policy Officer at OPDC. And I will, I'll try and take it in the order in which Robin's raised his point. So starting off with the re-provision wording within policy E1 as a suggested modification being put forward for from the GUA. So OPDC's position with regards to this is that the further modifications being sought are unnecessary. So policy E1 relates to the protection and strengthening of SIL, and the combination of policy E1 and policy E3, which is about supporting small and startup businesses, they include requirements. They set out requirements in relation to the need to provide industrial uses, the need to intensify, so create additional floor space capacity, to provide a mix of unit sizes, so not just small unit sizes, but a mix. That units are well designed for their intended purpose, providing flexibility for a range of broad industrial type activities. And E3 specifically focuses on the need for proposals to deliver affordable, shared or small units, and that's to support small or startup businesses. So they set out a range of requirements, which will mean that as development comes forward, there'll be a diversity of premises delivered within SIL, and those premises will allow for businesses who are relocating to relocate into those premises and to remain in the area within SIL. We actually have examples of developments that have taken forward that do include, for example, a mix of units, including small units, and they've been secured on site. So that diversity that Robin was talking about being so important in Park Royal would be maintained through the implementation of policy E1 and E3, pardon. So that's points we'd like to make in relation to that. Some supplementary points about the specific wording put forward. I know that Robin said that I guess the detailed wording is not important, maybe the re-provision, but just to point out some issues with the wording put forward in terms of them it being problematic. It gives a reference to all existing businesses and re-provision for all existing businesses within the OPDC area. That would include re-provision for businesses that are inside or outside of the SIL area. It could allow for re-provision for things that are currently industrial but also non-industrial businesses, because it makes a reference to all existing businesses. So it may lead to undesirable situations where the re-provisions being sought for businesses that are non-SIL compliant, which would undermine the objectives of policy E1, which is to protect, strengthen and intensify our SIL area. It's also quite problematic insofar as it seeks, again, by reference to seeking provision for all existing businesses. It's challenging for the decision taker to sort of clearly identify who it is they're re-providing for in that sense as well. So that's the points that I'd like to cover under the introducing new re-provision wording or additional, wording with regards to re-provision in policy E1. The request from GUA to include wording that prioritises relocations within the Park Royal and Old Oak area into policy E2. Again, our position is that the further modifications sought with regards to this are unnecessary. Our position is that supporting paragraph 9.18 sets out a sequential approach to supporting businesses that are outside SIL if they need to relocate off-site, and that sequential approach prioritises sites in the OPDC area as a first step. So this additional text, adding that into policy is not necessary. Just to point out that paragraph 9.18 sets out very detailed requirements linked to the need for a business relocation strategy, and all of that information is rightly contained in supporting paragraphs to E2, and it sets out what the applicant must do as part of their relocation strategy, and that's where the sequential approach is set out, and all of that detailed information is set out in that supporting text to provide clarification on how we will implement the policy. So those are the points that we'd like to make in terms of re-provision. A point of clarification, as Robin raised it under his re-provision arguments, in terms of the evolution of policies E1 and E2 and how they've evolved over time, the policies that E1 and E2 were phrased in terms of developments coming forward in SIL in E1, that's what that deals with, and E2 deals with developments outside of SIL, and it's been that way since the Regulation 2 plan, and so that's the plan. That's also the plan that we submitted. So it's been in that format since that time. So moving on to, I think, Robin's next point was about whether capacity is an adequate response to your earlier hearing findings. So just to cover this, we do consider that we've taken appropriate steps to ensure the effectiveness of policies E1 and E2, and I'll take you through the reasons why we think that. So we've provided a response to the matters at that time, and you've got the reference. Robin referred you to the reference in terms of our response that we gave when we submitted at that time. We've undertaken a thorough review of changes, and where appropriate, we've put forward changes as modifications. So that's the first point. Also want to highlight a couple of things to make you aware of. The first one being that we have undertaken additional evidence to support our modifications, which give further justification for the potential for industrial intensification. So that was one of the matters that you raised as part of your earlier hearing findings. Also, as a second point, I want to point out that we are intending to do further work and provide more detail as part of a supplementary planning document to support matters around industrial development. And lastly, the evidence that we have in terms of ongoing monitoring and what's being achieved in terms of industrial intensification. So I'll take each of those in turn. So the first point in terms of what modifications we're putting forward. So in addition to the word capacity in policy E1, we're also, as Robin's directed you to, making modifications to paragraphs 9.9, where we refer to the need to deliver high plot ratios, but give a range of considerations around industrial intensification related to that. And also supporting paragraph 9.19, where we, as Robin rightly referred to, introduce OPDC, what powers OPDC have to facilitate business relocation. So in addition to the word capacity, we do also put forward those additional modifications. in terms of the second point, we've undertaken additional evidence to support our modifications in relation to industrial intensification, and this shows that we are sort of continuing to proactively engage with the need to identify opportunities. So the new or additional evidence that we've undertaken is set out in the Old Oak North intensification study, and that has arisen with the recommendation to retain Old Oak North within SIL. We have sought to proactively identify intensification opportunities in that document. It's supported by an updated viability assessment, and it identifies quite significant potential for new floor space in Old Oak North. And we engaged with landowners as part of the findings arising from that. And you'll see in the examination library that there are statements of common ground have been agreed with those landowners. And in addition to that, the findings from the Old Oak North intensification study and the Park Royal intensification study have informed the industrial land review addendum, and that sets out an updated calculation to demonstrate our overall no net loss of industrial floor space capacity. I mentioned that we were preparing a industrial supplementary planning document, so we're starting work to prepare that, and there's scope for that to include greater detail in relation to those matters to support the implementation of policy and provide guidance in relation to policy. And my last point in terms of the progress that's being made in our area with regards to industrial intensification. So we do have monitoring information that shows since OPDC's establishment, in terms of either through planning approval or things that are in the pipeline, we are nearing the 150,000 square metre mark in terms of net gain of industrial floor space, and that's against projections that we have in our ILR addendum that intensification could deliver just over 250,000 square metres. So hopefully that gives some reassurance in terms of what's coming through the planning pipeline. And Robin mentioned schemes coming forward. An example of one that we've seen is actually one that we set an expectation that would deliver around 30,000 square metres in industrial intensification, and actually it's delivered a lot more than we were anticipating. So we think that the combination of the modifications we've put forward and what we're demonstrating in terms of continuing to prepare studies in relation to matters that are relevant to the earlier hearing findings, and what the updated monitoring is saying with regards to intensification, demonstrate that we are proactively engaging with those issues. I'm trying to catch up if there's anything else to cover. I'll just hand over to Tom to
Hi. I was just going to respond in particular to the point about the OPDC 31 document and the section at paragraph 1.13 of that regarding some wording we proposed previously that hasn't made its way into the final version main modifications draft. So this modification was made in response to a matter raised by Car Giant during the hearings in 2019, and I don't know if you recall, Inspector, but at the time, obviously, the interim findings hadn't been published. Car Giant are making a point about their sort of specific circumstances and the need for them to, as part of optimising their operations, potentially ahead of any decant, needing to do certain sort of interim business relocations on the site. And we put forward this modification to satisfy needs. Obviously, then the interim findings were published, and we went through an exercise of looking back at the various modifications we had proposed and see if they're still relevant. In respect to the CE2 modification, we actually sort of reflected and thought that we already have an existing meanwhile uses policy, a contingent uses policy within the town centre chapter, which is because I think where we got to is that this particular modification would only relate to kind of business uses. It wouldn't relate to other uses such as retail or cultural uses. So what we thought is instead it's better to just rely on the meanwhile uses policy, and that effectively mirrors what's in the modification proposed at 1.13. Allows developments to occur ahead of site allocation comprehensive development happening, so long as that development would not impact on the deliverability of site allocations. So the meanwhile uses policy, for your reference, is policy TCC 8 in the town centre community uses chapter. I mean, what we'd be happy to offer as a modification to support text in policy E2 is a cross-reference to that policy and stating that business uses, interim business uses, could be permissible, ahead of the comprehensive redevelopment of sites in accordance with policy TCC 8, meanwhile uses, if that was something the inspector wanted to entertain. Lauren, did you try and back to you if there was any point you wanted to have? Yeah.
And just to wrap up on the last part of discussion with Robin in terms of the GUA proposed modification related to no net loss, just to cover our OPDC response with regards to that. So our position is that further modifications sought by GUA with regards to this are unnecessary. The reasons for that, firstly, is that to make it clear that the intention of OPDC's local plan is very much to plan for jobs growth, and we support that in a number of ways, and it's evident in a number of ways, starting with policies SP5 and E1, which are clear that development within SIL should help towards meeting the strategic jobs target. So that's quite upfront in the document, and that target is clear. And those indicative targets are also set out for our site allocations, and those are set as those are based on minimum floor space targets. So there's opportunities as they're linked to floor space. If those floor space targets are exceeded, that job opportunities could increase. They're also cited in our place policies, which are inclusive of the site locations and take into account potential for industrial intensification. And like I say, all of our job targets are indicative and based on minimum floor space targets. There are sort of challenges, practical challenges in terms of a no net loss of jobs approach. I'll just take you through reasons why we think that's challenging. So firstly, the difficulties in terms of knowing and controlling exact job provision. Like I say, our indicative job targets in the local plan have been derived from floor space and floor space targets. And there's obviously a clear mechanism in terms of securing floor space. In terms of the exact job provision, there's difficulties in terms of knowing who the end user or operator is and how these might change over time. It's further complicated with the permitted changes of use between SIL compliant uses, which could have very different job densities, wildly different job densities. So OPDC is not able to control how jobs may change over time if they're implemented through permitted changes of use, and actually, notwithstanding permitted development, many planning applications in SIL seek flexibility between different industrial uses. And again, same point applies. Employment densities can vary significantly between those uses. And the approach that we've taken is very much in step with, we see it as in step with other London boroughs on this point. The next point I'd like to make in relation to this is to sort of focus in on what the function of SIL is. Robin did remark on some of the significance in terms of the SIL in the OPDC area, but just to sort of cover that off, we have London's largest strategic industrial location, and it does perform an essential role not only locally but sub-regionally and for London in terms of servicing London's population and businesses in central London as well as Heathrow. So businesses in Old Oak and Park Royal have a significance, and they're particularly important to the function of London. And it's one of the few areas where you can accommodate business uses that can operate here that would otherwise cause conflict elsewhere if they were adjacent to sensitive uses. So it does provide a home for some of those difficult uses that need to operate maybe 24 hours a day and create noise and so on. So our SIL is hugely significant, and what our evidence base, OPDC's evidence base shows, and this is in the Future Employment Growth Sector Study, is that in terms of future growth, there are a range of future employment growth sectors that could grow in our area, could be attracted in our area, some of which are sort of industrial uses that cover a range of use classes. So we do need to be able to accommodate a range of industrial uses. At the London plan level, there's strategic evidence that supports the London plan, which shows net demand for industrial capacity. Robin mentioned this, and that demand does include things like for distribution and logistics, and that's specific. And there is specific demand, industrial demand within the Park Royal and Heathrow property area, which OPDC is part of. Therefore, the intention of policy is to support an appropriate range of industrial uses and deliver floor space within SIL, so this diversity of demand can be met. We're trying to strike the balance between meeting the range of demand from those different industrial uses. And the reality is that some SIL compliant uses can generate lower numbers of jobs, but that doesn't take away from the fact that they are appropriate uses in SIL, and they do need to have a home, and they do provide local, sub-regional and a more strategic function, despite having lower employment densities. So through the local plan, we're ensuring that we're helping to meet evidence need for a range of industrial uses as set out in our evidence base. This approach is in general conformity with the adopted London plan, which, when you look at the employment policies in relation to SIL, are quite clear about the function of SIL and protecting that, the intensification of uses, and having a sufficient supply of premises. Those references in the London plan are clear in terms of the function of SIL. And a final point, there are other actions that OPDC is taking related to jobs that I wanted to point out. So we are intending to monitor net change in number of jobs within our area, our area as a whole, and that's set out as a key performance indicator, and we're using external data sources. So there is a way that we can track over time, or that we can track change over time, so we know what's happening. Secondly, we are updating our planning obligations supplementary planning document, and that will set out more detail on how we can secure contributions towards local employment training and economic opportunities, and that can look at the potential to secure off-site financial on and off-site financial contributions to help support jobs growth and support local people into jobs. And just to remark on what give an indication of what we've secured already through planning obligations with regards to this, it stands at around £2.7 million worth of contributions secured within our area. So that sort of shows that we've taken very seriously the need to support jobs growth and people and support local people into jobs. And I think I've covered all the points that we wanted to make under that.
Thank you very much, both Lauren and Tom there. Okay. Robin, is there anything that you want to respond to on that?
Thank you, sir. And I just wondered if my colleague Jennifer Robinson, who's on the call, wanted to contribute. But could I thank Lauren for a very able and competent response, at least from an OPDC perspective. The latter part of her presentation did run through various points that we're on agreement with as to the character and likely future for Park Royal as SIL. As regards Tom's point, cross-referencing to the town centre's policy TCC 8, looking at that, it's supporting proposals for meanwhile uses where the proposed use contributes positively to the character and early activation of an area. That's point 1 of the policy. That really is about early activation of town centre areas, and not to allowing industrial estates. And I quoted 4 examples of industrial estates outside of SIL that are site allocated for years 6 to 20 for redevelopment. But in the meantime, what if they want to change? What do they want to adapt or grow? So I don't necessarily think that cross-referencing is entirely adequate or necessarily appropriate. And that's why I was very interested in the original proposition from OPDC in their document 31 to have a new clause E for policy E2. And on the evolution of policies E in 1 and 2, it's the very fact that they're now geographically differentiated between SIL and outside SIL, and that E1, although it does have some distinct advantages for existing businesses, it has now lost or doesn't provide for the advantageous clauses that E2 has. And I also wanted to strengthen E2 to be able to take well, not the text, the actual text, but to try and have wording that encapsulates the strengths and merits of the text, particularly the business relocation part of the text. And there are it is so difficult to come up with an appropriate form of words, and I do understand that there are wording issues that could prove to be problematical with the precise wording that the GUA has advanced. But that's really this sort of what I wanted to say, and I see Jennifer and another have their hands up.
Okay.
May I refer to Jennifer? But I mean, that's your prerogative.
Yes, I wanted to hear from you first, Robin. I see I've got Tom Cardis and Jennifer Robinson. I'll hear from Jennifer Robinson first and then Tom Cardis.
Hi, thank you very much. Yesterday I failed to introduce myself for viewers, so apologies. I'm a professor of urban geography at UCL and have been working closely with the GUA on various matters in relation to my research. Here, just respond specifically to Lauren's comments. Obviously, it's difficult to do so comprehensively on a verbal presentation, but here I would say the real concern is that if we look at the composition of business in the CIL areas today, and OPDC's own work has been wonderful on this, some of the most innovative industrial review work in the city. This is made up of many different kinds of businesses. Over the years, especially Old Oak North, but also Park Royal, has provided an opportunity for a very diverse economy, interrelated, interconnected, very locally dependent, and they evidence that very well. So the difficulty with E3 being a response to the concerns with E1 is that it focuses only on small or startups. I also detected in Lauren's concern that the OPDC wants to bring only clearly industrial uses forward in the CIL areas, which would be which justifies not re-providing for the diverse sectors that are currently there. So the OPDC seems to be saying that they just want all these other businesses to be removed, including perhaps larger industrial uses which don't fit the new model of intensification, and the diverse commercial, cultural sector, etc. activities which characterize the OPDC area. These businesses are quite substantial, from car giant to car phone warehouse, and many things in between. So the re-provision, support for existing jobs is really, really a crucial concern of the local community residents and workers in the area. And I don't see what the reason is for excluding this re-provision in CIL of existing businesses to protect existing jobs. One issue would be perhaps around the cost of this. So I think when the very first industrial regeneration policy was set forward by the OPDC, it seemed that industrial land intensification may not be viable. But given the numbers that Robin read out, for example, about the price of land now, landowners are already grabbing a windfall on their land prior to development applications coming forward, perhaps. And this is a classic London problem. Where does the value of that land increase go? And I would argue that there's plenty of value in the regeneration now to support the re-provision through S106 arrangements of all different kinds of activities that are existing in Park Royal to protect London's economy and to protect people's jobs. The question is perhaps that one needs to decompose the increases in the land prices in Park Royal and Old Oak North into those which are generalized land increases because of the increasing demand for industrial land in London. And so that windfall might well be captured by planning authorities, and that is the implication of the London Plan's financing strategy, that land value increase is what can be captured to support planning ambitions. It's the only source of financing that the London Plan envisages. It's a very appropriate use for it here. And the second dimension of windfall gain is from the OPDC's own policies, its own red line around the area, its own plan to intensify and support the intensification of industrial land, which really benefits industrial landowners. It's very appropriate that the windfall from that industrial land increase should be allocated to the protection of existing businesses and jobs. So that was my response to that comment from Lauren. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Jennifer Robertson. Now I'll hear Tom Cardis, and then Lauren Laviniere wants to come back as well. So Tom first.
So I'm coming back actually on Robin's point in respect of the meanwhile uses policy. So apologies for jumping around a bit, but just sort of Robin pointed to the fact that the meanwhile uses policy has a number of strands to it. It's probably just worth quickly going through each in turn. The first one is the first bullet is the one that Robin focused on, and it says that the proposal should positively contribute to the character and early activation of an area. I mean, I still think that applies. That is appropriate for business industrial uses as much as it is for other business operations, because we have, and we have other policies in the plan that worked to those meetings. We have a policy D3, which is well-designed buildings in the design chapter, which would apply to any development scenario, which requires proposals to respond positively to the character of existing context and emerging new context. We have cost-cutting policies requiring proposals to deliver active, positive frontages. So just to sort of respond to Robin's point, I don't think that the inclusion of that bullet in the meanwhile uses policy would preclude us from considering a proposal on an industrial estate to do something on an interim basis ahead of the site delivered comprehensive development. And I suppose what we are talking about here is a use that would be in place for at most 10 to 15 years. So I don't think if there was a proposal coming forward that was proposing something quite significant, complete new build of facilities, it's unlikely that that would satisfy the sort of part 3 strand of the meanwhile uses policy about not impacting the delivery of site allocation. I think what we are envisaging within the meanwhile uses policy, and what we were envisaging within our proposed modification treaty that we put to you back in 2019 was something sort of small to medium scale really occurring and designed in such a way that it could easily be sort of deconstructed as and when the site was required for business development.
Okay, I've got that down. Lauren, then let's hear what you want to say.
Thank you. My comments are in response to the comments of Jennifer Robinson and our points of clarification. So policy SP5 and E1 talk about a mix of units, so not restricted just to small units, but very much envisaging a range within that mix, including it could be small, medium, and large as part of that. So just to clarify that. And in terms of the sectors, the diversity of part rule at the moment, and the diversity looking into the future, I made reference to our evidence base in terms of, I'll make reference to our evidence base in terms of the future economic growth sectors, and there's a diagram in our local plan that sort of helpfully sort of illustrates what that was saying in terms of the range of uses that could be attracted and grow in the OPDC area, and that does include a mix of uses that are industrial and perhaps better located within SIL, but also other uses that could co-locate as part of a mixed use setup, and actually our local plan provides conditions for both of those things to happen. So it protects and maintains SIL and supports intensification to allow SIL uses to stay and grow as appropriate there, but also we have obviously other places outside of SIL where a mix of uses, and there's place policies that set out what uses are supported there that allow other uses that are compatible with residential-led development, say, to co-locate with them as well. So those conditions will allow for a continuing diversity of different industrial and uses to locate and stay in our area, and a mix of, like I say, a mix of sizes, unit sizes within that. So I hope that responds and to Jennifer's points that she raised.
Yeah, it does. Okay. Right. I'm drawing quite a lot of messages from this morning's discussion, not least the difficulty of drafting policies to cover a great diversity of situations, and not necessarily compatible with the sort of intransiges of the planning system, which focus obviously on land and buildings and floor space rather than people and jobs. Okay, Jennifer Robinson, you want to come back on something? Let's hear from you.
Oh, thank you. I just wonder if, given Lauren's statement there about the mix of reprovisioning and the mix of uses they envisage within, the mix of uses they envisage within the SIL areas, why can they not make that clear in this discussion E1, E2, and E3 that is their intention, is to support a mixed economy there, which is what exists already. And I just strongly reiterate the suggestion that better protection for existing economic activities would be really important. Otherwise, we're just redistributing value from existing businesses to the windfall gains of developers in the industrial sector. So what I read in, for example, policy E2D, here is the opportunity that people could just give vacant tenants, just get rid of their tenants and make an argument that this business is no longer viable. For 1 year, they hold a vacant property, and then it's just the business is just deleted. So I think that also goes in a bad direction for protecting existing businesses. And I think there's great concern amongst the many different groups and constituencies and businesses and residents in the area. There's great concern about this, and we've seen this come up in previous discussions in different planning applications. So on the one hand, I think it's Carpo and Warehouse whose reprovisioning is still in question in the Imperial College-led development. And on the other hand, we have the church at Scrubs Lane, which has been not protected well enough. It has a lot of social economy functions in terms of supporting nursery, local school children's development, social support for young people, and so on. And it really needs a very strong protection for existing uses that are valued by people and businesses that are hooked into a very locally dependent economy, a rich, diverse economy that London needs. It's not to say that this is just local versus the strategic activities that are coming soon. This is what London needs. It needs the place for all these different kinds of activities to take place, and it's the OPDC's own work which has demonstrated that. So protecting this organic economy that exists there in Park Royal is protecting London's economy. So I think that was a false contrast, that the strategic activities are the ones to come. These are not the things London needs. These are the things that London needs that are located in Park Royal now. To delete them would be a real problem. So I think this is behind the request for the wording change in policy E1 to allocate the same protections to businesses inside SIL as to those outside SIL. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I've now got Emma Williamson who would like to speak.
I just wanted to clarify in relation to Scrubs Lane and the church and community use. The church and the community space is explicitly protected within the site allocation, and there was a planning permission which replaced the church, which is now expired. So just to clarify, the church and the community space and their reprovision in any redevelopment is protected within the site allocations in policy. I don't know whether Lauren or Tom want to come back on any of Jennifer's other points. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Emma. Right. Okay, I think we've probably had as much helpful discussion on this as we're going to get, unless anybody feels that there's any aspect of this which we haven't yet covered. So I think I'm going to draw the discussion to a close now and say that I am grateful to you all for bringing to my attention aspects of this discussion which I hadn't fully grasped earlier. I'm going to go away and think about it now. So I'm not going to suggest immediately that any action be taken. I want time to think about it. Lauren, you want to make a contribution before we close?
Yes, just to flag one thing that we didn't respond to, which Robin mentioned, and two modifications that GUA suggested. So it was the typos, so the incorrect reference to T8 in policy E2 and the validation requirement that's still listed in E2. And just to keep it short, just to say that we're happy to draft minor draft minor modifications for your consideration in relation to those.
Yeah, that's very helpful. I mean, part of my report, well, even if it's not in my report, it is a given thing that one would expect the OPDC to do a final check on cross-referencing throughout the document before it's finally adopted, because it's been through so many changes since Regulation 18 drafts and Regulation 19 submissions. It's been changed so much that there will need to be a comprehensive quality check before you finally adopt it. That goes without saying, and that I'll just leave that to the OPDC to do. And any obvious typos are within your remit to correct. And Robin, if you've noticed them, I'm sure the OPDC will be very grateful if you send them a schedule of what you think are typos, and then they can take them on board. That's not something that I need to specifically make a recommendation on. Okay, so is there anything else which people think we need to discuss this morning? If not, I'm going to say thank you to everyone for your contributions. As I say, I'm going to take some time out now to think about this and see which way I go. If I want any more work done from the OPDC, I will write and say. I may find that the discussion we've had is enough for me to come to conclusions and just issue instructions in my final report. I don't know which way I'll jump at all, but I've got that option. So once again, thank you all for your time and contributions this morning. I'm going to leave you now. Bye.
Thank you.